Welcome to Codex, History of Video Games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta. This show got instantly better the minute we started being able to see each other dance before we start.
Yeah, the song is important. The dance is important. I hope that
Mhm.
other people dance when they hear the song. They're like, oh,
How
I get
they just do
excited for an
the
episode
head
of
dance
Codex. And
back
just,
and forth.
yeah. But this week, we're going to try something new. We're going to do a book review. And the book we're covering today is called From Ants to Zombies, 6 Decades of Video Game Horror by Alexander Chatziioannou. Do you know how to?
I don't know how to say it, and I realized I put that on you. I didn't mean to put that on you. Tyler, I wrote you an intro. I didn't realize that's gonna make it so much harder. I
That's
don't
all
know how
right.
to say their last name. It's a great book, though. I read this over the last couple months since I got it, and I'm thoroughly impressed with it. And I just felt like it would be a good thing to talk about today. We cover books in long series formats, the two of us, and I thought it would be kind of nice instead to take one of these kind of more picture style coffee table books and go through it a little bit. So that's what we're going to do today. But yeah, this is the cover of the book. It's a first of all, I guess we should review this. It's a very well put together book.
It looks sturdy.
It's sturdy. It's got the shiny pages on the side here. It's very fancy, very glossy and nice. It's from Bitmap Books. They're the ones that publish this, and I'd never purchased any of their stuff before, and I am extremely impressed. So hey, Bitmap Books.
Great.
Also, this is not a sponsored thing, by the way. I paid money and I bought this book with my own money, and it's not a sponsor. This is a true review here.
We've never had a sponsor.
We've never had a sponsor this entire show ever. So, but yeah, I just thought it'd be fun to talk about today because this book really covers everything horror. It's pretty impressive how they've done this, and it's over 600 pages. It's a pretty hefty book, and so I just kind of wanted to get started with talking about the intro of the book and how it was made and the choices that were made with how to format it. So the big thing about the book is it's divided up into different genres of horror that were made by the author, different genres, and we'll go through those in a minute. But the big thing to point out is they don't actually cover all of the bigger games. For example, Silent Hill 1 is in here. Silent Hill 2 is not in here.
Do they cover other sequels, or is that just we got the first one? We call
no. So they cover some sequels, but they don't cover some of the beginning games too. They really are strategically picked to fit into these areas, and there are some that they Resident Evil, the initial Resident Evil, they have to cover. They cover it in the survival horror section. They had to do it right, but there's other. For Resident Evil 4 is an honorable mention. It's not, it doesn't have a little thing in there. It's there's an honorable mention section after every single chapter. And that is where they usually cover these bigger games that they're not putting in there. For example, Doom 3 is in here, but the initial Doom is not in here.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd call the initial Doom like a horror game. And rip and tear. It's kind of spooky in its themes, but I wouldn't call it a horror game.
And that's another part of it too. So the introduction of this book goes into all these questions about, well, what is horror and where did it come from and how are we putting it in the context of video games? And I think they do a great job going through that and explaining their reasoning behind it. So throughout the whole book, I was more on the line of pleasantly surprised when I saw something I really recognized a lot than I was saying, this wasn't in here and I'm upset. That's kind of where I was at. So the book is divided into different sections, as I've called them, where they have different genres. And we're just going to kind of go through each genre right now and kind of talk about it in a lens of us personally. And I've tried to pick games that both you and I have played that are in the sections here. We're not going to cover all the games. There are a couple in here that I read and played, which is a kind of a fun thing to happen in a book like this, where you read about it and you're like, I'm going to play that. And then you do. A lot of them are the shorter games, like the text adventure kind of games, but we're just going to get into it. Are you ready, Tyler?
Yes, I'm ready. Tell me more, Mike.
Okay. The first section is space horror. All right. So this is a lot of alien influence in here. Then, the original is it 79?
79, I think, is Alien.
1979 movie Alien. And the two games that really stuck out to me are ones that I've played. There's some great ones in here that are very obscure, creepy old computer games and stuff that I really want to try. Sinistar is one that is really kind of stands out to me, where you're fighting and then there's this angry like super robot sun or star that like attacks you if you take too long. It's really creepy. It's like, so it like builds tension. But I picked Doom 3 and Dead Space. I've played Dead Space. You and I have both played Doom 3. I know you said Doom 3 is the one you're least familiar with, probably.
Yeah, I think I played Doom 3 way back in the day when it first came out because it was like a technological, as most Doom games are, like technological showcase. I played it. I guess I did play the Xbox version in System Link. They had like a sort of reduced co-op mode. I played through that whole game in like one evening with a friend once, which was pretty fun.
Did you play it when it was original Flashlight Oregon? Because that
Yeah,
was the big thing, right? That was
yeah,
the
no
big.
duct tape mod.
Yeah, the duct tape mod is what like when I only way I've played it is the duct tape mod because I played it
Yeah,
relatively
yeah,
recently.
because the original Xbox version I think was not duct tape mod.
It was like you can either have your flashlight out or you
Yeah,
can have your gun out, but not
yeah.
both, which I think is great because it's scary.
Yeah,
It's what
that
makes
makes
it
it
scary.
scary. Yeah, it makes it different. That's what makes it like a survival horror game, or not survival horror, but like a horror game over the like run and gun of other Dooms. Because I think when you put that duct tape mod in there, you get a little bit more actiony, which is still fun. That's also very fun. It's just not quite the same.
Yeah, and I think like it also, if I recall, the introduction of like walking through the station before things happen is a lot longer than I thought it would be. Like there's a lot more. It really builds the peaceful moment where you're to the point where you're like, when are the monsters going to attack?
Yeah, they really learned from that first Half-Life game of like
Yeah.
the long intro.
So that's the first one I put on there, and then the other one that's on there is Dead Space. And Dead Space, I feel like is just quintessential horror, with the shooting off of the limbs is like a different mechanic. And Dead Space actually comes up later on in the rail shooter section
Okay.
because they cover rail shooters because that's kind of a quintessential horror genre that I never really thought about.
Mm.
And apparently, Dead Space had a rail shooter that was actually really good, and no one played it. It's
Oh,
kind of
like an
bizarre.
arcade game or?
Yes and no. I think there was a Wii version as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's just something to kind of think about. But space horror, I mean, I love space horror. I love science fiction. I love Alien. So this section was great. It had everything covered in there as far as like it like nods to Alien. But the funniest part to me was how many games initially in space horror are just straight up we're ripping off Alien. Like that's just what we're
Yeah, I
doing.
mean, really.
Yeah, but that's a good section. I mean, it's great. The next one on there is called Haunted Mansions, and I hadn't played a majority of these games, but the one that stood out to me is the one that I was familiar with from the hype around it, and I never played it because I wasn't a PlayStation guy. Did you ever play PT?
Well, it never officially released. It was just the demo.
Yeah, did you ever play the demo of
No,
PT?
no, I
Because
never
that was on
played it.
PlayStation, and it was. I've watched videos of it now, and that is in, way too scary for me.
Yeah,
I can't. I
it
can't.
looks super spooky. Do they cover the Amnesia games? Or at least the first one is kind of a haunted mansion game.
They do cover it, and actually, I'm going to use the book because you can actually, in the back of it, this is the other part I was going to save at the end, but they have a really good index of all the games they
Oh,
cover and what page they're on. So yeah, Amnesia: The Dark Descent is covered
okay.
on
Because I did
one.
play the first Amnesia game, and I thought it was very spooky.
Yeah, Amnesia: The Dark Descent is covered on 119. I think that is.
It does. It is very much a haunted mansion game, but it maybe a relentless pursuer actually might be more accurate.
It actually, so The Dark Descent is actually under the Terror of the Abyss because that's the Amnesia game. Again, that's the Amnesia game they
Oh,
picked for
terror
the
from
book.
the abyss. I don't even
Yeah,
know what that
so
means.
spooky scary. Oh, they actually just talk about it in here too. They just mention it. They don't actually cover it. It's just in the
Okay.
intro here. Yeah, I don't know if there's actually an Amnesia game in the book. That's another thing that's like they're really picking, like how they
Yeah.
pick it is pretty interesting to me too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the haunted mansion section, I thought they would put Resident Evil in here, but they save it later for in Sweet Home also because this again,
Mm.
there's kind of some crossover stuff here, but they save that for the survival horror section in the end. Terror from the Abyss is funny because that's like oceanic horror, like deep ocean stuff. But the best game that made the one that I recognize and the one that made me laugh is Echo the Dolphin is in this section because I don't know if you've played Echo the Dolphin or not. It
No, you're gonna have
does
to
get
tell me how this becomes a horror game.
so it starts out and it's like a beautiful ocean and it's bright and you see the surface and the sun is shining, and then the longer you play the game the deeper you go, and it gets kind of eerie and spooky, and there's big sea creatures in the deep ocean. So
Ugh, ugh.
do you not like the ocean? Is this a fear I found of yours?
No, I don't have a problem with the ocean. I mean, the deep ocean is very spooky, scary. I'm not like one of those people that's like I can't swim in the ocean, but the
Hmm.
deep ocean is definitely spooky.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not getting in a submarine or anything anytime soon. So
No, no.
yeah, but it's just interesting because that's the cool part about this book is that it'll cover these older like retro. So they have another game that's like an octopus game that's very simple, old computer, I want to say. But then it covers things like Echo the Dolphin, and it jumps into different genres that you not genres, different games that you would not expect that actually do fit in this book. And Echo the Dolphin is kind of one of those ones that I was reading, and I was like, oh yeah, like I remember being a kid and playing this in like a friend's basement. And it does, you get deeper and deeper into the ocean, and it does get scarier and scarier because there's no light. There's actually like dark mechanics where you can't see near you. So
Oh,
it's kind of,
dang.
yeah, it gets kind of spooky. All right. So Dark Forests is the next section. And I hadn't played a lot of games, but the one that I recognize is kind of a newer one, the Blair Witch game.
Oh, I that came out. Is that a few years ago that they
Yeah,
made a Blair Witch game? Yeah.
a few years ago. So they really talk about like I think ghouls and ghosts is also in the section too because it's like very much the dark forest motif. There's also a game called Forbidden Forest. It's like one of the first horror games to involve a forest setting that a lot of games take a lot of influence from. But I chose Blair Witch one because I think that's something that a lot more of us would know, and that's something that you and I know. And I watched a friend play Blair Witch, and it does get real creepy, like
I mean, the
real.
movie's kind of scary too, right? I haven't
Oh
seen
yeah,
it, but I
I
assume
watched the
it's
movie recently. Actually, I want to say I watched it last year, and it is scary. And it's crazy because it gets scary in that you watch the people slowly kind of go crazy. It's one of those kind of horror
Mhm.
movies, and that's what makes it even worse. Because you're like, why are you doing that? Why don't you just do this instead? And
Yeah.
because you're watching it from outside, and it's like, oh.
Right.
And I think that's what this game really does too. But also the Blair Witch game, adorable dog as your friend.
Can you pet the dog?
You can pet the dog, and the dog will actually go grab stuff and find stuff for you, which is kind of
Oh,
a cool mechanic.
nice.
Yeah. So the Dark Forest is the fourth chapter. Relentless Pursuers is something that I like the title of this section because this is your standard issue teen slasher movie.
Mhm.
This is your Friday the 13th, your Nightmare on Elm Street, like that's all this stuff. But they also, in a video game sense, cover one of my personal favorites in a game we've talked about on this podcast before, Fear, First Encounter Assault Recon.
Mhm.
And I'm a big Fear fan.
I have played through the whole first Fear game.
And the Fear game where it's like a John Woo mixed with creepy ring girl chasing you through the vents. We did an
Yeah,
episode on it.
creepy ring girl is the relentless pursuer in this.
Alma, yeah.
Alma, that's right.
Scariest moment I ever had in a video game was in a vent in Fear because you're like walking through the vent and you turn your flashlight as you round a corner and she's just right there and then she like spider crawls at you and then disappears. It's the
Yeah,
scariest thing.
I had a similar moment in that same game. You're walking along like a some sort of mezzanine thing. Anyway, you're gonna go down a ladder, and you turn around to go down the ladder, and she's right there as you like spin around. Like, ah!
They do such a good job with it. That's the kind of horror that makes me laugh and I enjoy is like
Yeah,
like that kind of stuff. I'm not a big fan of the gore horror stuff. It doesn't even scare me. It's just like this is just gross. It's just
yeah.
not engaging at all to me. But yeah, I Relentless Pursuers is good. There were a lot of bad video games made for Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, which leads to my next point and an overall point in this book. And it's something that he talks about. He covers games that are not good, but are significant for horror video games. And he will usually say that in the book when as the chapters go on, he'll say, this game is kind of a miss. He'll even say it. He'll never say like a game's bad, but it'll definitely be like, this game didn't work the way it was trying to, but he still puts it in the book because it's significant for
Yeah.
horror and he says why. And I think that's why it's important too is yeah, not all these games are game of the year contenders, but they're important for the genre of horror, and that's what's a good factor in this book and something that you should keep in mind, which I like. So I don't think it should be all amazing games. That's the next chapter though, and the one that I find one of the scariest is Wayward Children. You know,
What what is that genre?
like creepy kids.
No.
Like, you know that one movie with the kid that's like the devil or whatever, you know?
I
Blue,
feel like there's several of
this
them.
like Damien or something. Is that the name of it? I don't
That
know.
sounds like a demon child's name.
Yeah, if you know a kid named Damien, they're probably a demon child, is what we're trying to tell you. So just know that. But the one that stood out to me here, and it's kind of also it fits in this genre, but it's not what I would think initially is Limbo. Have you played the game Limbo?
A little bit. Like I've seen it. It definitely has creepy child vibes for sure.
Limbo
But I
and
have,
Inside is the other one that I played.
yeah.
That
And they just came out with, I think, Cocoon. Is this
oh, is there
another by the
more?
same developer?
Oh, I did not know that.
I think so. It's like very recent, like last few months.
Oh wow, yeah. But Limbo is it's very eerie, and the art style of Limbo with like the shadows and the dulled out colors is really good too. But yeah, I'm this chapter for me, I'm not gonna play any games in this chapter. I just don't want to. I don't want to play any of the games in this chapter. It's too scary. It's too spooky scary for me.
No.
This is why we don't cover horror stuff on this podcast, is because Tyler and I are a bunch of scaredy cats. And we're okay. We admit it. We're fine with it. It's okay. But yeah. So this other chapter is the other one that was really exciting to me. And that is a chapter called Universal Monster, like
Oh,
talking about the big Universal monsters.
like monsters that Universal Studios owns.
Yeah, like Frankenstein,
Frankenstein,
Dracula,
Dracula.
Creature from the Black Lagoon. And this is also where Castlevania lies, because the original Castlevania, if you recall, you fight all the Universal monsters, but they're not called that for
Yeah.
copyright reasons. But that's Frankenstein. The Creature from the Black Lagoon shows up and disappears. There's Dracula,
Yeah.
like the
I feel like a
Mummy.
lot of those got to be out of copyright by now. If Mickey Mouse is uncopyrighted now from Steamboat Willie, I feel like you can
Mhm.
say Dracula.
Yeah, the hard part with that though is like Universal's brought so much branding around it, because they were trying to make their Marvel MCU, but the Universal Monsters Cinematic Universe kind of thing, you know, with they
Yeah.
did the Mummy movie with Tom Cruise that didn't really hit, and I think it kind of fizzled out. But you're probably right. It's probably getting
Yeah.
close.
I think you can say maybe, yeah, I don't know. Because like Frankenstein, that book is like from the 1850s or something. Like
It's
that
old.
character is at least not copyrighted. Maybe the movie version, like if that's like a significantly different or recognizable version, maybe it's not. But
Yeah, I agree. But I also wanted to just shout out that Castlevania is a Universal Monster video game, technically, just without
yeah,
the the copyright on it, because you are fighting. I mean, Dracula's the main villain. That's technically a Universal property, I guess.
Hmm.
I think they just never sued because of the King Kong thing and Donkey Kong.
Oh yeah,
It's probably why they just didn't pursue legal action against Castlevania, because they're like, well, if we couldn't win the case with Donkey Kong, we probably can't win the case with Dracula. And they never say Dracula. They don't call it Frankenstein. They don't call it, I don't think you can copyright mummies. That's like a thing.
yeah,
That's just a thing. That's just a monster that exists. You can't copyright werewolves.
right.
Twilight, looking at you.
At certain point, those types of monsters are just they're just out there for everybody to use.
Yeah, that's right. They're in the cultural cultural zeitgeist. Is that the right word? I don't know.
Sure, yeah,
Look up the word zeitgeist for me. What does that even mean?
that's probably correct.
It's probably correct. Okay, it feels right. All right. So Universal Monsters is a great chapter, and I really enjoyed it. And also, it's one of the ones that like I was reading this book and I was looking forward to them as I was going along, because I read at the beginning what they were. And this did not disappoint, because it has also a lot like the Relentless Pursuers chapter, some really weird games. There's a game where you play as Dracula in a computer game. And let me see if I can find it in here. But you essentially have to you have to kill people as Dracula, okay, uh,
Okay.
and then you get their life force, but then you have to go back home before dawn, right?
Oh yeah, well of course, because otherwise you can
Because
burst into
you're
flames.
exactly because you're Dracula. So there's multiple. There's one, two, three, four, five different Dracula games in this book. Uh, 330. I think we're gonna get 334 is the one I'm looking at here. But I just want to make sure it's the right one, because I kind of want to show a picture of it and put it into the camera. This is gonna really be, yeah, this is it. So this is gonna be for all our people at home, but this is what it looks like. Uh, I don't know if that could be seen. Yeah,
Yeah, it
it's
looks like
very
an Atari 2600 game.
yeah, it's an Atari 2600 game, and no, it's actually in television. It's
Oh,
on the
okay.
Intellivision.
Yeah, yeah.
But the cool thing about it is you are Dracula. You're playing as Dracula, and you have to like bite people and then take their life force. Because if you stay too long and you get too many people, this werewolf comes out to get you, which is really just an adorable little dog, as you can see. That's apparently the big wolf that comes out to get you. So there's games like this in there, which just crack me up, and I think it's really funny.
Very scary.
The horror theme, but not scary, just kind of funny in this point. So, Nature Unleashed is the next chapter. This is where I was expecting to see a Jurassic Park game,
Mm.
but they actually don't. They have Dino Crisis in here instead, which I kind of get, and they have an honorable mention for Jurassic Park. But Dino Crisis does make a lot more sense because that is more of a survival horror dinosaur game than, say, the Jurassic Park they honorably mention is the SNES version,
Mm.
which is still a good game. It did some cool stuff. It was a top-down game. I'm going to nerd out on this for a second. It was a top-down game that had sections that were first-person Doom style on the
Oh, that's
SNES.
cool.
I have it ready for me to play. I bought a limited run games version, like collection of Jurassic Park games on Switch, and I plan to play those so I can review them for the podcast. And that is one of them, and I really want to go through it because it was trying to do something really different, and it didn't really relate. I think the more popular Jurassic Park game is the Sega Genesis version because that's where Alan Grant is an action hero and just like murders dinosaurs and soldiers, and people remember that game as being more of a fun Jurassic Park game, I think.
Sounds fun.
It is cool. It's a really cool game. It's an action platformer, like your standard 90s game. But the one that for SNES was trying to do something different, and I respect that. So the game that I chose, though, for Nature Unleashed is Grounded, which is a newer game that I played.
I didn't think that was a horror game. It looked like a not a kids game, but like a fun game about kids.
Well, have you played Grounded yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, because you are a child and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids Land, and
Mhm.
spiders chase you, and it is terrifying, and it is
Okay.
not, and they are giant spiders because you were a tiny person, and they are like, so it is a very scary game. I can think of multiple people in my life that would not like that as a thing. So, I think Grounded is a good example of Nature Unleashed because it's just, I mean, the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Did you watch those movies?
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
it, like the first one. Then there's Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves too.
Mm-hmm. But that's like a whole genre of like being a little person with insects all around you. You know, we talked about Army Men Sarge's Heroes is a cool game because you're fighting in like kitchens and stuff.
Mhm.
It's like that, but you are a person, and now you have to deal with gigantic insects, which is also very scary.
Okay.
So yeah, I like that section. The next one though was the section that I really was blown away by, and that is text adventures. There's a whole separate section for text adventures. And have you played a lot of text games?
No, I have not.
You have not? Okay, because I've played some because when I started probably around like 2017, 2018, I was messing around with Twine. The year of Twine?
Mhm.
Like the interactive narrative thing. And they talk about some Twine games in here. And the one that stood out to me, and this is one of the games I played after reading the book because it was only like 20, 25 minutes long, is a game called an interactive story, I guess I should say, interactive fiction called My Father's Long, Long Legs. And
Okay.
it's got a scary title, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not going to go into spoilers here. But the premise is you're reading a story about a family, and then the father just starts digging in the basement, just digging in the basement and keeps digging. And and it gets really weird and creepy and spooky. And if you buy this book, I highly encourage you to go through these text games and try them out because they are very different and spooky. And if you want to get scared reading, try that.
Okay.
That way, because I wore headphones while I played My Father's Long Long Legs, and this sound, and it gets really eerie if you're by yourself reading this
Okay.
story and the sound. And there's a cool flashlight mechanic. It's really neat. So I don't really. It's hard because it's a short experience, and I don't want to spoil anything. So I want people to play My Father's Long Long Legs
Okay.
if you want to get scared.
All right. I'll keep it in mind. I generally don't want to get scared.
You don't want to get scared. What if
Generally
we
not.
popcorn read it, you and I together?
Okay, maybe we
We're
could do
third
that.
graders. Okay, so the
That's
next.
horror, man. The teacher starts popcorn reading.
Oh yeah, that's real. That's
That-
anxiety and horror right there
yeah.
for sure. Let's do the next section where this is kind of where the book opens up. These last 4 chapters have a lot more interviews in them. I forgot to mention that up top, that the book utilizes creator interviews in their chapters. So you'll be reading it, a little section, a little blurb about the game, and then the creator actually will talk about it for a couple pages, which is kind of
Oh, that's
cool.
cool.
And the interactive movie section, the rail shooter section, these are the next chapters, survival horror and new retro, all have heavy focus on creator input. And interactive movies is fun because you have your Night Trap,
Mm-hmm.
you got like your classics like that. Sewer Shark is actually covered in the rail shooter section because that's what it's a rail shooter.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that stuck out to me here was Until Dawn, and we have played that together.
That is a spooky game. That's fun. That
That
game
is
is
a
very cool. I need
it's
to
a
play the Quarry still, which is I think the same people
it
or the
is.
same
Oh,
the same developer. Yeah.
yeah, because that's a game that I would recommend to our audience to play with friends. Like that's a
Yeah.
really fun game to pass the controller around with.
Yeah.
If you don't know what Until Dawn is, it's a game about teenagers that go stay the night at this like lodge on a mountain, and your choices change the story, but there's no going back. There's no reloading a save. You are locked in. You are playing a movie, and it's not that long of a game. What did you say, like 2.5, 3 hours, probably?
I'd say it's a little longer than that. I'm gonna see how long to beat it because I want
Maybe
to
it's
say it's like
4 or
5 or
5.
6.
Yeah,
Let's see. Until Dawn, 8 hours is what
it's
how
eight
long the beat
hours.
says. Yeah.
Dude, I don't remember it being that long when we played it because we kind of played it in a couple nights though, all of us, right? Like we had a group of 4 or 5 people and we were passing the controller
Yeah.
around. Maybe a couple sessions.
Yeah. I think it only took us a couple sessions. Yeah. If you
Yeah,
play it for 3 hours a night, you could get
you'll
it done
get
in
through
two and
it.
a half sessions.
Yeah. So it's cool in that the story choices you make are like permanent, and there is like a good ending, if you would call it that, where like you can get save everyone and like do it the right way. But
Mhm.
it's way more fun playing with friends and having the controller passed around and some person just biffing a quick time event and then the game just going completely south. That was way better. That was my
Yeah,
favorite part of
yeah,
the
and then suddenly
experience.
somebody's dead, and
Yeah,
there's no going back.
they're still going back. So highly recommend Until Dawn. I think Until Dawn kind of perfected it. They
Yeah,
did what Night Trap wanted to do,
yes, I agree.
where, where they wanted to make it so it was like this cool interactive experience. But yeah, Until Dawn is a great game, and I was super stoked that it was in this book. So rail shooters, I mentioned Sewer Shark. That's the next section. The one that I want to cover because I think it's the most popular rail shooter probably. And this is your standard issue. You are usually holding a gun in an arcade and shooting into the screen. And that is The House of the Dead, the original The House of the Dead. It's a
Gotta love
classic.
House of the Dead.
It's a classic where they would like do those silly little like roll somersaults at you. Like that was their like scary dodge mechanic. I love this games. I love House of the Dead. I kind of wish Area 51 was in here. That's like the rail shooter that's like a classic to me, but I don't know how horror
Yeah,
movie it
say, is it that spooky? I mean, I guess it could be space horror, but I think just
is.
having aliens in space doesn't mean it's a horror game.
Yeah, and also, and I should know this because I read the book. They mention that the rail shooter section this is more of a history one than I would say the other sections are. That's because each chapter opens up with a little blurb about the genre, right? And the the rail shooter is taken from multiple things. It's not really video games. It's taken from carnival games, like actual holding a BB gun and shooting cans at a
Mhm.
carnival, and something called a ghost train. You know what a ghost train is? It's like a dark ride at a fair where you would get on a little train car and go through this ride. They're called like ghost trains
Like
or
a
dark
tunnel of love,
rides.
but spooky.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd see like scary scenes in it.
Okay.
And so that's what the rail shooter is. It's a combination of these old ghost train rides and this carnival shooter put together in a video game form. So in that sense, Area 51 doesn't really cover it because it's not a spooky, scary atmosphere. So
Yeah.
I guess you're right. But I just love Area 51. And I don't care who knows it. So there's that.
Great
Okay.
game.
Great game. 10 out of 10. Survival horror. This is where the big ones are. This is where your Resident Evil is. This
Mhm.
is where your Sweet Home is, your Silent Hill. But for me, and the biggest surprise, and it's a game I haven't played, is Project Firestart. Have you ever heard of this game?
No, never heard of it.
This game came out 10 years before Resident Evil, and it came out a year before Sweet Home, and it did all the stuff that Resident Evil does, and no one
Oh.
really remembers it.
Huh.
Yeah, because even in our Resident Evil episode, I mentioned that the biggest influence from Resident Evil was Sweet Home, which is true. Like
Mhm.
they talked, like the two creators talked, like, can you make a 3D version of Sweet Home? And that's became Resident Evil. But as far as like being the first to do it, Project Firestart was actually probably the first.
Huh.
And it's very much another kind of ripoff of the movie Alien in space, where you have a limited inventory, you have a choice you have to make at the end about who to save and who to like dies, and it's like you're very much like your choices matter, and it's a survival game, limited ammunition, limited like resources to try to solve the problem and get things done, and in a spooky, scary atmosphere. So I just thought that was cool. If you are interested at all in survival horror as a genre, um, I would recommend checking out Project Firestart or buying this book and looking at the little section on Project Firestart too. They also go into how survival horror has become the name of the whole genre
Mhm.
in 2024, instead of it being its own subgenre of horror. Like, instead of people will say a horror game, they'll be like, oh, Dead Space is a survival horror game. I'm like, is it? It's more of like an action game than anything. It's a horror game, but it has action to it, you know. That's why it's
Yeah.
in the space
What
column.
what makes Resident Evil survival horror versus Dead Space as a person who has not really spent much time with
I
either
would
of those games?
say what, and this is what the book was talking about too, limited inventory space.
Okay.
You need to run from fights, or in a lot of the newer true survival horror games, you can't fight at all. Like I'm thinking about
Mm.
Outlast, where you have a camera.
Yeah.
It also, I mean, there's some crossover here because Blair Witch, you don't have any weapons. That's kind of a survival horror game in itself too,
Okay.
which I think is why it bleeds together, is because we've been seeing a lot more of those lately, I would say, than actually seeing um true survival horror games, whereas like you need to run. You need to,
Yeah.
like,
But,
you
yeah,
need to,
it's about surviving. Sometimes that's being able to kill the enemies, but lots of times it's just getting away.
exactly. and
Gotcha.
and there's some other games in here too that are mentioned as being like this one with like a cool camera aesthetic where you take a picture of the ghost and it kind of weakens it, and that's how
Hmm.
you pass through it. I'm not, the name is not recognizing in my brain. Again, this a lot of games in this book, and I read the whole thing, but it is very dense. So you would
Yeah.
have to go through and reread it a lot, but it's just a really well done, structured book. So let's go to the last section though. And this is the one that, of course, I was most excited about when I was reading it. And I'm like, of course, I save it for last. And it's kind of a nod to the future of this genre of horror as a video game genre. And that's the new retro section. That is referring to games that are made to look like older systems. Like you're looking at your Atari 2600 DMake style games,
Hmm.
but they do horror. So the big one, and the one that I am most familiar with on this entire section, is Faith, the Unholy Trinity, which is a Atari 2600 style game made that is just so scary for what it is. It's so scary. You play a priest, and so, and you're a priest because your character's all black, but he has a white collar because, again, it's the Atari, so that's what it looks like, and that's all they could do. And you have to go to this house in the first one, and you have to fix this mistake you made. That's pretty much the intro. That's what they tell you. And you get in the car, you get out. There's a very creepy narrator, like garbled, like voice to read things to you, so it's really scary. But there's a creature chasing you in the forest, and if it catches you, it switches to this very scary rotoscope animation that is deeply unsettling. And it's games like this that get me excited about horror games, because someone's taking something that is probably the least scary thing in the world, which would be Atari 2600 graphics, and turning it into something so terrifying. There's also a Game Boy game that does this too. A lot of these this new, new retro. It's really the name of the genre. It's taking old systems and the aesthetics of those systems and making horror games out of them with a very minimalist style. And I think
Hmm.
that's very cool. PS1 has kind of had a renaissance of that graphic style as well, of
Yeah,
being
because
scary.
there's something just sort of like going back and looking at PS1 games, like there's just something sort of a little unsettling about the way those games look, like those early 3D games that like make them prone to glitching strangely, and so you can sort of use that to your advantage in a horror game, I imagine, of like making things glitch weirdly or like just like I don't know. And it's like a slight reminder of childhood there of playing these games when you were
Mhm.
younger too, of like what if I had booted up Spyro and this happened instead, kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and that's what they're playing off of. So the Faith game, there's an interview with the creator. I believe his name is Erdorf, is the name of the creator, Ardorf, and he said, "I wanted you to play this game and feel like you picked up a haunted Atari cartridge."
Yeah, there's lots of like creepypasta, like
Yeah,
Pokemon creepypasta of like I went to Goodwill and got this like charred Pokemon game and it's like cursed and they tell you all the weird stuff that happens in it.
yeah, and that's what they're going for, and that's what's great about it. And the other thing about this section I wanted to mention, and it's very near the end of the book, so I'm just going to flip to it real quick, is there is a collection that is called the DreadX collection. This is for Windows. It came out in 2020. If you are interested in these like retro horror games, this new retro style, this collection was a bunch of this people featured in this book making very short games for this collection. So the guy who makes Faith, the Erdorf is his name, makes a creepy game that looks like a old, I'm holding the book up, LCD handheld
Oh,
game.
yeah, it does.
It looks like those Tiger Electronics handheld game. And he makes like a horror game out of that. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I would look up the DreadX collection. But
Okay.
this is like the part of the horror genre that excites me the most because it's new. It's indie people just making a game that they want to make. And I think the way they describe this DreadX collection is the person they interview who published it. I think it might be through Epic also. They essentially gave everyone $1,000 to make a game in a week. Like we're going to give you $1,000, which is good pay for an indie developer for $1,000 to make you only spend 1 week on this is what they said.
Mm-hmm.
Make a short horror vignette essentially, and then we'll release it as a collection. And I thought it was really cool because they're taking the idea of indie filmmaking of you and your friends using a video camcorder to make a found footage horror movie in a weekend
Yeah,
that could potentially make millions of dollars if it hits, just like Paranormal Activity did.
sure.
But they're doing this in the sense of video games, which I thought was like one of the coolest ideas in this book. And that's like, I'm trying not to spoil any of the book, but that's one of the big ideas to me that really stood out. Is like, this is really cool. Is they're making an indie horror game scene out of it. So overall impressions, I love the book. I have no complaints about it. I think we're calling this a review, but I wouldn't have kept reading it if it was bad. You know what I
You would
mean?
have just not done it.
I
Yeah.
would have just been like, if this book was bad, I just would not be talking about it on the podcast right now. So I recommend it. It's called From Ants to Zombies, 6 Decades of Video Game Horror. It's also got really cool artwork for each of the chapters, like cool pixel art icons and stuff. They hired an artist to do it. I recommend this book. And also Bitmap Books just seems like a great company. I don't know anything about them, but hey, they're making great stuff.
Yeah, they made at least one great thing.
Yeah, bitmapbooks.com apparently is their website. Again, not sponsored, just a fan.
But could be.
But could be. Not sponsored, but could be. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of everything I have. If I guess the reason I would advise you to read this book is it's a great book, like a lot like the one for nonviolent video games, where if you have a horror aficionado in your life that loves horror movies and you want to get them into video games, just put this on your coffee table and invite them over and see what happens and lure them in, you know? Also, the games in the book really make me want to play them. And the cool thing is, because a lot of these games are really old, like they were for like ZX Spectrum or Commodore 64, you can play them through archive.org.
Oh.
So highly recommend you look it up. If you want to play these games, you can play most of them for free because there are a lot of the older ones anyway. I'm not sure about the newer ones, but I did find a lot of them. And he even mentions in the back, like there's a lot of stuff. He's like, a lot of these games can be found on archive.org essentially. So yeah. So From Ants to Zombies. Do we give it a score? We've never done this before.
Sounds like a 5 out of 5.
Sounds like a 5 out of 5. 100%. Read
It's
the
good.
book. It's a good book.
If it sounds interesting to you, then it is.
Exactly. Tyler, what you been playing?
This week, I put all of my gaming time, for the most part, into Persona 5 Tactica, and I finished it a couple nights ago, and I loved it. It might be my favorite tactical RPG. No, I'm not an expert. I haven't played a ton of tactical RPGs, but I am getting more and more into them.
More than Mario Rabbids?
I think so, because it maintains a lot of simplicity of the stuff that Mario Rabbids did, to like sort of make that genre a little more accessible, to like, how it's like you can either hit or 50% chance or you're not going to hit. In Persona, it's either going to hit or it's not.
Oh,
There's no 50/50s.
so they make it even simpler.
Yeah. So they learned a lot of that stuff. And then I just love the way that it's its own battle system and tactical RPG, but it really incorporates a lot of the things that the main Persona 5 game has, and other Persona games too, like the um, when you knock down enemies, you get another turn. If you knock down in the turn-based games, if you knock down all the enemies, you can do like an all-out attack. It's just like a big attack that hurts everybody. But in Tactica, when you knock down an enemy, you have 3 characters out on the playing field at any time, and between them, it'll draw lines between them. So you try to make like a big area in which you can attack everything in that area, as long as one of the enemies in that area has been downed.
Oh.
Which is, so it makes these like really fun, like, okay, if I split all of my characters up so they can't help each other, but if I can cover the whole map in this triangle, that's going to be pretty sweet. And there are some battles later where that is extremely helpful. And it seems like maybe the level was designed around doing that, because there's just so many enemies. You're like, I couldn't take these out one at a time. So I really love it. Every encounter feels just like its own little puzzle. You have full resources every time you go into a battle, full HP, full SP, like everything comes back, and then it's just battle after battle. And in between the battles is like visual novel storytelling. It's probably 50/50 battles and
Oh,
storytelling.
wow. How long is the game? Like, how long were you playing it for?
25 hours is about how long it
That's
took
not
me.
bad. That's a good
No,
amount.
no, it's on Game Pass. And
Ooh.
so I just love the like no frills, no BS here, just story, and then we're gonna go jump into some battles, and we're gonna get some more story, and we're gonna get some battles. And I just really loved it. It was very streamlined, felt very much like it respected the player's time. I had a lot of fun with it. And then there was a bunch of like side missions that are even more like puzzly, where you can tell it's like, oh, this level has a gimmick, and I need to figure out how to use the gimmick perfectly, which is really cool. They're really hard though, so I have not done very many of them. But yeah, loved
I
it.
like
That's
that
pretty
you
much
can.
all that I've spent time playing though this past week, because I really wanted to finish it. What about you?
Yeah. I like that you can recognize that this is the gimmick. This is what I need to do. So
Yeah,
you can learn it. That's cool. That like it's not like there's no mystery here. You just gotta figure this out. And then once you
yeah.
figure it out, you got it.
Yeah, there's one where because like if you hit an enemy that's not in cover, you get another turn, and they're downed. They become downed. Where so nobody, if somebody else hits that enemy while they're down, they don't get another turn because they're already down. So there's like one where you have to get one specific character all the way to the end of the level. It's one of the earlier side quests. You have to get them all the way to the end. There's no way they'd be able to just run there, and you have to do it in one turn. There's no way they'd be able to do it like just running, obviously. So it's about using your other characters to set up enemies that will be out of cover, because like certain moves can like move people around and stuff like that. So it's about setting up this like lineup of enemies that are out of cover, so that you can go one more, and just like make it all the way to the
You can
end.
go
It's
down the
really
line. That's fun. Yeah, well, I this week I haven't really been playing a lot of games. I picked up New World again.
Oh, okay.
New World, they've changed stuff around. So I've been playing with our friend, doing a little the Outpost Rush, really fun. Um, I also here I gotta drink some water real quick. Hold on, this is so much better. Why didn't I just do that in the beginning? Okay. Um, I have a friend, a dear friend. I don't know if you know this person or not, Tyler. They got me Spider-Man remastered for Christmas.
Oh, no, was it Santa Claus
It
or
was Santa Claus, I think.
wow.
Yeah, and so I started playing the new Spider-Man remastered on
Hey.
PC, and it's so fun. Thank you, Tyler. Tyler's Santa, everybody. Sorry, I couldn't keep the secret anymore. Tyler's Santa Claus, everyone. So I started playing Spider-Man, and I'm really digging it. I'm getting it. I get it. I get why it's so fun. The combos just feel great. Like even in that first, I've only played like 48 minutes. I did the first like intro that shows you how to do everything in like Fisk Tower, and then I started the sciencey stuff, and then I had to work on this podcast episode, so I didn't really get to play that much. But the combos of like how you fight and you pull people in and you dodge and you go under them and you just like doing like acrobatics. It's just so cool. You feel like Spider-Man. It's
Yeah.
like the same feeling that Batman did, where they just nailed it and
Yep.
they just got the combat. And I'm excited about this. This is a Wolverine game they're making, right?
Yeah. I'm excited for that too.
How that turns out is great. So I'm going to be playing that all this week. I started my tactician run on Baldur's Gate 3 as a monk. I didn't play it at all this week because I was just playing other games, doing other things. I watched a lot of Clone Wars, the Star Wars show. I'm really watching that a lot. So, but yeah, I'm excited to play more Spider-Man this week. And that's kind of where I'm at. We're not going to do emails today. We got kind of a tight schedule today, so we're going to head out. But things you can do to support us: you can send us an email at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can go to codexpodcast.net. It's got our Discord on there. It's got our email on there. It's got our Trello boards on there. Also, the big announcement for Codex is we have an Instagram now, an official Codex podcast Instagram. I made it. It's Codex History Pod. That's what it is, at Codex History Podcast or Pod. Oh, I should know this. I should really know this. I think it's Codex History Podcast.
We should put them in the overlay on the video, just like along the bottom.
Yeah, we can do that. I can make that for the next video. But okay. Yeah, we have an Instagram now. It's gonna, I felt like I took a long time to do it because I was kind of apprehensive because I'm not a big social media guy.
Same.
Tyler's not a big social media guy. But it's important to have one in today's date and time. And so if you want to be supportive in any way, following that account would really help us out. I think it would just be a great thing to do. Here, I'm actually going to go to it right now. It's Codex History Podcast. It's at Codex History Podcast on Instagram. Follow our account. Mean the world to us. Tyler, do you want to say goodbye to everybody?
I do want to say goodbye to everybody. Goodbye, everybody.